Coming up on Fresh Dev, we start to build our own plugin for sharing your blog posts.
That's right. We're going to look at custom actions and filters today on this episode of Fresh Dev.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Fresh Dev. I'm your host, Matt.
And I'm Scott.
Scott, always good to see you sitting in the seat to the left of me, viewers right, correct?
Good to see you. Yes, that's correct.
All right, so this is part 4, WordPress plugin development. What is this show all about besides WordPress plugin development? It's all about WordPress 101 development, right? Let me shut my phone off.
Yep.
So we take some of the questions, problems, roadblocks, in a very easy-to-use format to help you with your WordPress development. And continuing on, WordPress plugin development, part 4. Last week, we talked about actions and filters. Week prior to that, we talked about setting the foundation, picking the plugin, researching the plugin. Are you doing something that someone else is already doing? If so, go help them.
That's right. Yep. Contribute to their projects. And if not, then you can follow this guide and make your own plugins.
Sweet. So take us into part 4. First off, we're looking at creating our own custom hooks.
That's right.
Actions or filters.
Yes. So last week we talked about actions, filters, as you said. Those were the default, WordPress actions and filters. Basically, what ships with WordPress. For instance, the content, WP&Q scripts. Today we'll talk about actually creating our own hooks and actions and filters to allow other developers to make modifications, where we want them to. Basically, you can actually create your own custom action or filter. You come up with your own name, and then you can come up with a developer guide, or people can look at your source code, and they're able to say, okay, here's where I can do X, Y, and Z, and here's where I can't. Should somebody request a feature, say, hey, look, I think I need you need a hook here so I can do this. If you think that they should, then you can go ahead and build that hook into your next release.
And probably the most obvious thing is to make these hooks readable, for lack of a better word, right? They should just make sense.
Yes.
These hooks that you're naming them. So, if it's like, I don't know, something that's after post or something like that, or let's say that's a hook that you make or whatever, it shouldn't be called like
SEO Matt or something, right?
It should be something that's kind of relevant to what it does.
Exactly. Yeah, and another point that I want to make is you want to namespace or prefix your hooks to ensure that there's no collisions with other hooks within WordPress, and also that other developers can create. So, for instance, if you had a hook and you named it the content, well, there's already one that exists in WordPress.
So what happens in that scenario, though? Somebody does that. How do they know it's a collision, or how do they know that it's not going to work?
They may or may not know. It could be a tough thing to kind of debug. So you can't, of course, you can't account for every single plugin developer out there and whatnot, but you can go by what's within WordPress. So you probably want to search to make sure that the
start with at least WordPress.
Yeah, and make sure it doesn't exist in WordPress. A good way to kind of get around this is to prefix your tag name. So, for instance, we work at Slocum Design Studio. If we're making a plugin, we might add a hook, either an action or a filter, and we might call it SDS after content or something like that. That way, we know that in this particular plugin, this is our hook. There is no other plugin out there, we hope, with the SDS prefix. Something to keep in mind. But it may be tough to figure out, how these collisions occur.
Right.
Developer thinks they might be, making a modification to just your plugin. Your hook exists in another plugin. Now they're making it to both, but they don't really know because there's so many plugins out there.
We covered the debug toolbar and all kinds of stuff. Does that help in any of this? Just so folks know that they have something with ready to.
I think they can. I think there's options that will show which hooks and actions and filters are output on a particular page, so that could help.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's kind of flying by the seat of your pants sometimes.
Nice. So what we're going to do for this rest of the series is we're going to create our own little plugin.
That's right.
For the rest of the example shows that we're going to put together. And we're going to make a plugin that pulls in some share buttons to our pages and posts, right? Something's just super simple that we can use as an example. So Scott, why don't we go down that path now of, okay, let's do our first custom action hook.
Okay. So, we're going through, we're saying, hey, I think that developers need to output their own functionality here. Let's go ahead and create our own action hook. We do that by using the function doAction, and that's actually built into WordPress. We'll provide links below. That function in particular takes in actually an infinite number of arguments. I'll explain that in a bit. It does take in one required argument, and that is the tag. For instance, what do you want to call this action hook? It could be something like SDS form, SDS underscore form, or SDS underscore membership, or SDS SEO, whatever you'd like to call it. It's a good idea to not include spaces, so you want to replace those with either hyphens or underscores.
And these naming conventions, these are all outlined somewhere in the...
I believe so, yes, in the codex, probably under the coding standards.
Okay.
And then after that, you can pass along any arguments you think that this action might need. So, for instance, you could pass the post object, which would be, the current post has all the data, the ID, the content, all that. You could pass, for instance, just the permalink of the post, a user ID. All depends on what your plugin is actually doing. But you have an infinite number that you can actually pass along, to this particular action.
Gotcha.
Probably want to limit it to maybe about 5 at the most. And I do want to point out that most actions do not include any arguments for you to really modify. Some do, and in some cases you need to. Probably, more often than not, you might just come across the action. Again, you're not modifying any data or using any data that you could grab elsewhere.
Right. And what do you think the first action might be for our little plugin?
Well, we could, for instance, we could have an action when we build our options panel, and it could allow developers to add their own options to this plugin.
Okay.
So we might call it like SDS underscore share underscore options panel, or something like that. Okay. To that effect.
All right.
Moving on after that, after we've created our action, we can create a filter now. Filters are different. If you remember last week, we talked about filters. They modify data. So these will definitely need at least one value passed to it. It's pretty much the same as doAction, except the function name is called apply filters. And you simply pass in the first argument is, again, the name of your tag. So what do you want to call this? We could call it SDS share buttons, SDS share buttons before, SDS share buttons after. Again, whatever you'd like to name it. And in this case, the second parameter is required, and it's the value that you want to make modifications to. So, it would be our data set of share buttons, in this case, that we might pass to it. If you take a look at the content filter, what's actually passed to that is the post content. Okay. So, the tag in that case is named the content, and then what's passed into that is the post content for us to make modifications to.
Gotcha. So just so people can, let's just sum up these two things real quick. So folks need the action hook and the filter hook to talk to each other. Yes or no?
No.
No. So in this example, the filter hook, the custom filter hook, is that going to be in the front end facing side of the site? So when the post gets rendered in the browser, this is what's going to make the plugins, the share buttons appear?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to use a filter for that. And then, we're also going to add our own filters so developers can add their own share buttons.
And these share buttons, like you reference SDS underscore share underscore buttons, the data set of these share buttons, those are living within our PHP files, function files that are within the plugins that we talked about in the previous episodes.
That's correct.
And how to organize, put them in subfolders or whatever, and just have them organized properly.
Yep, and our data set will exist in the function that we're using to actually output this share button. So, should we run through that, kind of how we're going about, outputting these share buttons?
Yeah, so I guess we can talk about where we're going to place these share buttons, and just kind of giving it a broad view of when the page is getting loaded, what's really happening.
Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to output our share buttons below the content.
Okay.
So after person's done writing their post, at the very end on the front end of the website, we'll have our little share buttons down there. We're going to include only Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. We're going to add filters to allow developers to include their own, such as LinkedIn or Yelp or whatever else they might want to share. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually hook into the content filter. And we're going to say...
There's an amazing sound coming from above us in the studio, so hopefully the mics don't pick up on it.
Okay. Anyway, we're going to hook into the content, and we're going to output our share buttons doing that. So basically what we're going to do, we hook into it. We grab the post because we need to get some data from the post, like the permalink and whatnot. We go ahead and we create a filter before our share buttons are output. And this is a custom filter that we created. And in this case, we called it SDS_share_buttons_before. And that allows developers to add their own custom buttons before our share buttons are actually output.
Where are the developers actually putting their buttons? Are they going right into our plugin and editing that, or are they putting them somewhere else so that they can easily modify their own code?
Good question. They're either probably putting them in, it depends, but the themes functions.php file or their own plugin, which we could call like an add-on to our plugin. But they want to keep it outside of our plugin code. They never want to modify our own plugin, because if we make an update to the plugin, all their changes get overwritten.
Gotcha.
So after our before, action filter, after our before filter, we're going to output all of our share buttons: Facebook, Twitter, Google+. And then after that, we also give a spot for developers to add their own buttons after our, default. So they have options either before or after to add their own custom share buttons, and they can add whatever code they'd like, to be able to output that.
Nice.
And then what we do is we go ahead and we actually return the content, and then after that we return our share buttons, because all filters do need to return some type of data.
Gotcha. So now at this point, our basic 3 share buttons are displayed on the post, just the post, or posts and pages?
The end of the content filter. So it would be posts and pages, custom post types.
So anything throughout the entire site.
That's correct.
Perhaps we go into how to filter that out next week.
That's right. Yeah, we could create an options panel that says, hey, show only on posts or show only on pages, and we could outline that next week.
That's awesome.
Definitely.
So any questions so far in the series? This is part 4 of WordPress plugin development. We're starting to really kick it into high gear now. So
That's
if we went from 0 to 60 pretty fast in this episode, we're starting to put the code down, in our plugin. Things are starting to get really
intense. Maybe.
Intense, yeah, is the word.
Hopefully
for
we
it.
didn't confuse too many of you, but
give us some feedback in the comments below. So far, the comments have been great. Everybody's been loving it, and we're going to create a little share plugin. We're going to provide all the code for you so that maybe we'll put it up on like GitHub at some point, but we'll share it now in our blog posts. You can kind of copy and paste that and follow along, hack away at that, and see how it works. Get a real taste for your first WordPress plugin development. So let us know in the comments. Hit subscribe. We want to hit 10,000 fans. It's something crazy Dan came up with.
We're getting close.
We're getting
maybe.
Yeah, we're just 1/10 of the way there. So we're pretty happy about that.
So close.
So we get a lot of other WordPress shows. We do a lot of WordPress stuff. If you need themes or other WordPress support, give us a call. slocumstudio.com, slocumstudio.com/subscribe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.